The Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Let's start with a prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we give thanks unto you, Lord, for bringing us to this evening in all peace. We thank you, Lord, for this wonderful opportunity to be here with your servant, Fadi Mikhail, as he talks to us and inspires us about Coptic Iconography and how we can connect spiritually in our life through iconography and in our prayers and worship. We ask you, Lord, to reward him and bless him and bless his family. We thank you, Lord, also for all your student leaders who labor to put this together for everyone. May, O Lord, bless them and reward them hundredfold and keep all your students, O Lord, safe and watch over them in this world. We ask this through intercessions of the Mother of God, Saint Mary and Archangel Michael, Saint John the Baptist, and the prayers of our patron saint, Saint Didymus the Blind. We ask you, Lord, to hear us and pray to you in thanksgiving and saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as you forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Well, everyone, welcome to Iconography Night with OCCM. I'm so glad to see all the chapters with us, and we're happy to have a lot of chapters gathered together: Texas A&M, Texas Tech, University of Houston, UT Arlington, UT Austin, UT Dallas, Belmont, Lipscomb, MTSU, Trevecca, Tennessee Tech, UT Knoxville, Vanderbilt, UCF, and we have folks from the other chapters as USF and UF, but all these groups are gathered together in one classroom. So we're happy to see all of you guys there. And I hope you are ready to be enriched through this conversation today. As our VP is asking you, turn your camera on so Fadi can see you and we can see all of you. So we're very happy to have with us Fadi Mikhail from UK Coptic Icons. And Fadi is gracious to be up at midnight and spending the next hour and a half with us. So I'll let Fadi give the introduction about himself and where he is and his journey with iconography and everything. All right. All right. So I hope all of us can give our undivided attention and sit down to pay attention, okay? And turn up your volume. Go ahead, Fadi. Thank you.
Thanks, Abuna. Can everyone hear me clearly? Is this okay? Give me thumbs up if you're all good. All right, good. Yeah, I just realized actually, Abuna, as soon as you said that, midnight being late, I was like, oh my God, for university meetings, this must be nothing. Midnight must be a breeze. I've actually only ever done 2 all-nighters in my life, which is quite embarrassing. Yeah, when you attend art school, you basically don't have to do all-nighters. Thank you everyone for taking the time, especially after long school days, to be present. I know there's nothing worse than people wasting your time when it's so precious. So I really hope you don't feel like this is a waste of time after I finished. If you do, call my secretary. I'll give you a refund. I don't have a secretary, so hard luck. Okay, so I'll try and be nice and quick and to the point. And I would just remind everyone that again, the worst thing about people wasting your time is you feel like you won't get that time back. So if at any point you feel like I am just talking, rubbish, then feel free to close your eyes and start praying about something else. I won't feel offended at all. I feel like that might be a very good use of your time if you did feel like you were getting your time wasted. So yeah, my name is Fadi. I live in the UK. I was brought up in the UK, even though both my parents are Egyptian. I'm sure that applies for a lot of you, except for North America or wherever you are, rather than the UK. I always wanted to be a painter. My dad was actually a doctor, but he was a really, really good painter himself. And so I grew up with lots of his paintings all around the house. And some of those were icons. But whenever I looked at them, I thought, oh my God, those look so boring to paint. I never want to paint those. They look so boring. They look like so fine. And I would just die if I had to paint those. So I used to just love kind of scooping up big buckets of oil paint and just slabbing it on stuff. And it was just like painting with colored butter. And that was everything to me. But then one day I just felt like this feeling like I would really like to paint about something more than fiction, because most of what I was painting about was from children's literature and fiction, story tales. And so I decided, you know what, I might just want to give iconography a go. But, you know, what is it to give iconography a go? I thought I better go and watch someone actually do this. And I was lucky enough to go to the US, Riverside in California, actually, and watch the late Professor Isaac Fanous, who we'll talk about in a little bit. He was painting his last church, what would be his last church before he passed away. And I watched him just for like a solid month. He just said, sit here and watch. And as I watched, I realized, wow, this isn't just about the image to this guy. This guy loves the process. He loves the smell of the paint. He loves the messiness. He loves the gooiness of it. And I thought, yes, this is my in. I finally have someone who can show me that actually, you know what, the process is about as spiritual for him as is the content. And that was my in. And after that, I just fell in love with iconography, you know, being able to tie my faith and my love of paint together somehow was amazing. That's the brief story. There are lots of great like parts of that story, but it'll take far too long if I get into all the little bits. So I thought tonight we would try and cover three simple questions. I hope they're simple. Number one, what are holy icons? Number two, when did they first start? Number three, are they useful to me, or are they just a waste of time? Because I hate wastes of time. So what are icons? I'm gonna just start by making something clear. When we talk about icons, especially in the Orthodox Church, we all know that the word icon, which is a Greek word, means image. But we are specifically not just talking about the portable icons that you guys see, you know, hung up in churches, those on wood. We are talking about all kinds of imagery that is used for liturgical and church and home use. So we're talking about stained glass. We're talking about anything that's embroidered in fabric, wall paintings, mosaics, anything carved in wood or stone. In fact, one of the first icons was mentioned in Exodus. So let me just share my screen so we can have a quick look at, let me find it. Yes. Okay. Hopefully you can all see that. Yes. Good. Good. All right. Let's read this. Exodus 25:17. This is God talking to Moses. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and 1.5 cubits its width. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold. Of hammered work, you shall make them at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub at one end and the other cherub at the other end. You shall make cherub at the 2 ends of it with 1 piece. Kind of gets a bit repetitive, but you get my point. He's talking about making imagery. And in this case, it's actually 3-dimensional carved imagery for the use of the worshippers. Next, Exodus 25:26. God talks again about, in fact, this time the curtains. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine woven linen and blue, purple, and scarlet thread. With artistic designs of cherubim, you shall weave them. So if I stop sharing my screen again, here I am again. So the point is that even from Exodus, we do see the use of imagery in the lives of the worshipful. It isn't just like this contemporary installation that we've had thrust upon us since Jesus. Saying that, however, there is more to our history of iconography, much more. And if I dare to share my screen again, I'm going to just bring up a few more images of. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong thing entirely. Bear with me. Bear with me, and I will share the right thing. You can tell I'm definitely not savvy at this, Monica. Okay, let's go down a page. No, that's definitely not what I want to share. What am I trying to share with you? I'm trying to share a completely different thing that I don't even have open yet. Bear with me. We're going to icons, icon presentations, brief history. There we go. Okay, here we go. Let's go to the very top of this presentation. Okay, so the question is, when were the first icons made? And who were they made by? So this is an interesting historic item or artifact, the Lauraton, pronounced many different ways, but I'll pronounce it Lauraton. So this is actually something that was made when a new emperor in Rome, or all over that kind of empire at the time, when they took a throne, a new portrait was made in various different media, but let's just for now say it was mostly in mosaic and painting. And that image, because it was portable, it was sent to all the different parts of the empire and hung in public places. Now, the reason this makes sense in the context of the icon is because when the portrait was present, the emperor was also symbolically present. Sound familiar? I hope so. And sometimes it was decorated with a wreath and candles were burnt in front of it, and it was even used in processions, hopefully starting to sound very familiar. So historically, even before Christ, this sort of thing was commonplace. So it's not a surprise that the early Christians started to do the same thing with images of Jesus and those who are particularly important to them. So let's go to St. Luke. This might come as familiar to you guys as well. Luke was a talented painter as well as a physician. And it is said in various oral traditions that he painted many icons of the Virgin Mary holding Christ. Admittedly, the locations of those icons are a little bit unknown, but tradition has it that some of them are seen in Egypt, in St. Catherine's Monastery. Hard to see, but let's assume it's right. Now, these three are not exact replicas of St. Luke's proposed icons, but what they are the three themes, or at least three of the themes that we know to have come from St. Luke by oral tradition. Let's just go through them very quickly. The far left, this is known usually as the Hordigen icon, which is basically the one where St. Mary is pointing to Christ. She's the pointer of the way. She's presenting Christ to us as the savior of the world. Sometimes in this icon, she'll look a little sad because she's contemplating what is likely to happen to her son, all the suffering that he's going to go through as he shows us the way, as he is the way. He's got to go through so much to offer himself to us. It's so beautiful to know that the Father was the one who sent Christ to us. He gifted Christ to us rather than us gifting Christ to the Father. The middle icon is the icon of tender love, known as that usually. And it's speaking more of the humanity of Jesus and of Mary and how like a love relationship between this mother and this son could be so powerful. And the miracle that, this could even happen, that Christ incarnate could be, the son of a human woman. Completely miraculous. And the third is even more so miraculous. This is known as the Platitera, which translates as wider than the heavens. Now, the miracle that's trying to be portrayed here is how on earth can a human woman have a womb wide enough to contain the heavens? That is the imperceptible God. And so that's the icon of the Platitera. So there are, and this is what we usually say are the first icons. There are icons known as the icons made without hands. Now, why are they known as that? Because ultimately they're the miraculous icons that were made, not painted, not made with human hands. Let's list the most obvious ones. Number one, the Shroud of Turin. Now, all of you will probably go, whoa, there is a lot of stuff said about that. We don't even know if it's real. Should you really be mentioning this, Fadi? Absolutely true. There are so many sides to this story, and many people say true, not true, don't really put too much faith in it. But for now, let's just assume that it is true based on as much history as we can glean. The Shroud of Turin. Next, the Veil of Veronica. Many of you would have heard that story that as Christ was on the road to Calvary, Saint Veronica pressed a cloth to his face and the imprint of his face was left on that cloth. And again, that's by oral tradition. It's not mentioned in the scriptures as far as I know. Now, the most important, and this is particularly important because the person who noted this, or the historian from whom we've heard this, is Eusebius, who, funnily enough, was against the use of icons. So it's all the more important to know that someone against the use of icons will write about the existence of icons that he's seen with his own eyes. Therefore, we know them to be reasonably believable, these accounts of his. So this account is of I think, a Syrian king. And he was a king or a ruler over a state city called Edessa, and he invited, by way of an envoy or an ambassador, he invited Jesus to come to Edessa because we hear that this king actually was sick, probably with leprosy, but some sort of skin disorder, so we hear. And when he invited Jesus Jesus said, I can't come, but listen, I'm going to send this letter with your envoy, and you know, we will send healing in due time, but I've got to stay here. And it's actually noted in this history of the church book by Eusebius, this history book, that letters were sent back and forth between these two, and that there are copies of these letters kept in Edessa somewhere. Anyway, what's important is that Christ, along with that letter, sent an imprint of his face, much like the Veil of Veronica, to the king, and the king was healed shortly after seeing this imprint. So that's probably the first that we attribute to the first icon per se, because it was made by Christ without hands. It was a miraculous one. Let me just stop sharing my screen now and come back to me. Hopefully you can all see me again. Not too ugly. Good stuff. Right. So the purpose of the icons. What is the purpose of the icons? And I haven't quite got to point 2 yet, which is, are icons useful for me? So let's just quickly mention what is the purpose of icons. To be very succinct about it, if I can use that word, the purpose for icons, because when you see icons, for instance, behind Abuna there, you know, those are painted beautifully and they look stunning visually speaking. And so you're a little bit distracted usually just by looking at them, you know, top to bottom. You're like, oh, that is beautiful. Look at that little face. Look how beautifully it's painted. Although that is, you know, a trait of any art, it isn't the function of an icon to have you gaze at it and just adore it for its objective worth. An icon is always made to try and point you towards something or someone else, the real thing, the real else. That's why it's sometimes known as a window to heaven. You know, there's not much point looking at the pane of glass at the window. It's a nice pane of glass, lovely. But look through the window and hopefully you'll see what the window is trying to open up to you. I was watching actually a really lovely video of a speaker today, just trying to glean some information for this talk. And he said something very, very short and very beautiful. He said, icons are images that make visible what is invisible, but we believe to be true nonetheless. I'll say it again. Icons are images that make visible to us what is invisible, but we believe to be true. And if you go to the creed in your mind, just recount the first part. We believe in one God, God the Father, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible. I can hear some questions coming up. I'll answer those later. Sorry, at the end. So what icons are trying to do is basically make visible to you what is invisible to your eyes, at least your human eyes, but we believe to be true. All right, now let's skip to icons useful to me, because we've already been blabbing on for 20 minutes and you don't even know if this is worth your time. Are icons useful to me? Why are they beneficial, if at all? I have my dad, Henny, he had a best friend, George. That sounds like a made-up story, but it's true. He had a best friend, George, and George happened to be, historically, one of Pope Kyrillus's very, very good friends, if not one of his closest friends. And so he would see him in all walks of life, in all parts of his day. And he said that on one occasion, he was with him in a liturgy, and Pope Kyrillos had a long queue of people coming for communion, and he would offer communion to one, and that person would stand by it and carry on. He'd offer communion to the next, and that person would carry on. And then suddenly, every now and again, a person would come to him asking for communion, and he would deny them communion. And George would sort of, after a while, he'd get very confused, and he'd say, you know, Sayyidina, why are you doing that? Well, I don't understand. Why are you refusing this person communion? And Pope Kyrillos said to George, can't you see? And George said, no, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean, can't I see? And so Pope Kyrillos put his hands on George, so the story goes by George, put his hand on George's eyes and said, dear God, may he see. And with that, George told my dad that his eyes suddenly could see the whole church in a completely different light. He would see everybody shining with light, except for a few who for some reason had dimmed faces, dimmed light. It was just nowhere near as bright, if bright at all. And those were the people that Pope Kyrillos was saying to them, either you're not ready or this is not for you right now. Carry on. So why am I telling you this? Let's just also go, before I say anything else, let's go in our minds to the story of the Transfiguration. You all know the story of the Transfiguration, I'm sure, but let's just recount it quickly. Jesus takes three disciples, Peter, James, and John, up the mountain. And suddenly before their eyes, Jesus shines with light, brighter than the sun. Even his clothes are shining. This is the Jesus that they thought they knew, but suddenly they saw him in a completely different light. Now, the question is, was Jesus different then than he was 10 minutes ago? And we know the answer to be no. He was always fully human, always fully God, the God-man, Jesus Christ. So what really happened? The disciples' eyes were the ones that were transfigured. Those were the eyes that suddenly could see things as they truly were. And I'm sure you all know what St. John says about this. He says, brethren, although we don't know what exactly we'll be like in the kingdom of heaven or what we will be, we know this, that we shall see him, God, as he truly is, because we shall be like him. It takes us being like God, being allowed to see like God, to see God as he truly is. If we see with just our human eyes, we'll only see flesh and bones. You know, the disciples only saw Jesus as flesh and bones most of the time. But for one beautiful moment, they saw the kingdom of heaven as it truly was, because suddenly their spiritual eyes were allowed to see as freely as they should be, as we will see in the kingdom of heaven. And I think, you know, if we take those two stories, just the simple one from George, Pope Kyrillos' good friend, and the transfiguration, you suddenly realize, am I not seeing what is really like there? Am I seeing it, what is there now? And, you know, one day I'll see something else. I think the answer we can glean from all this is actually what we see around us isn't half of what's really going on around us. If we could see with our spiritual eyes, we would see a completely different world. You might well see Saint Mina, you know, chilling on your couch at home. You might see angels walking through your front lawn back and forth. You might see Saint Mary, you know, conversing with Omine Irini on the couch over there. But we can't for some reason right now. It's a shame, but we will one day, is God's promise to us. When we are like him, we shall see him and the kingdom of heaven as it truly is. Now, what is the point of all this blah, 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 Fadi? The point is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the whole intention of Icons, to let you see the invisible that we believe to be true. So how are we doing this? Let's go to a few slides so we can just try and point you to exactly what Fadi is talking about. Such blabber. All right, share screen. I'm going to go to Acrobat again. And right, let's talk about halos. We've heard that word a million times, halo. What on earth is a halo? A halo isn't just a crown of glory. In fact, it's not a crown of glory at all in Orthodox iconography. You can see this round disc of light, and that is exactly what it's meant to be. It is meant to be a depiction, a very diagrammatic depiction, but a depiction nonetheless of this person glowing with the same light that George was talking about, that Pope Kyrillos saw, that anyone whose spiritual eyes are opened, whether it's at lovely moments in life or all the time somehow, they would see everyone glowing, beaming forth from the inside out with the Holy Spirit, because that's what we really are made of. We're made of God's image, God's light. That's what the Holy Spirit is doing in us, but we can't see it with our human eyes. Maybe one day we will. So that's what halo is. Number two, this is a bit more complicated, but bear with me. Multi-perspective. In icons, if you have a look at that Annunciation icon, Gabriel talking to Mary, the architecture in the back looks, to say the least, pretty weird. Okay, it just doesn't make sense. Normal perspective would not see a building underneath and yet also at the same time from above, from the left and from the right in that way. It just doesn't make human sense. Perspective doesn't work like that in the real world. So in icons, what we're trying to do is give you the same sight as the omnipotent God, who can see from the left, from the right, from above, from below. If you could see every situation, everything in every single light, you would never judge your brother, because you would always be able to give him an excuse. Can you imagine if, you know, the worst thing in the world is to be misunderstood. You hate it when your friend just cannot understand why you annoyed him that day by mistake, but they're annoyed with you nonetheless. But if only they knew that it's because you had a bad hour an hour before, and somebody got on your nerves the hour before, and your mum did this and your dad did that. If they could see the whole world from every perspective, suddenly they'd be the perfect judge. And that's why God is the perfect judge, because he sees everything all at the same time without fault. And that's what icons in this multi-perspective are trying to do. Now, I'm showing you and talking about the Annunciation on the left. I'm giving you an example of a Coptic icon on the right. We do it a bit more simply in Coptic iconography, I have to admit, because the icon on the left is a Greek one, whereas the one on the right is a Coptic. If you can try and see what I'm talking about, the flatness of the carpet when compared, for instance, with the platform that Jesus's feet are on, you'll see that, again, perspective there doesn't make sense. It's a multi-universe perspective. One's flat, pushed up against the plane of the picture, and one recedes almost as if like real perspective would actually behave. So that is an example of how we use multi-perspective in iconography in the Coptic tradition. Timelessness is the third and one of the many factors that we talk about to try and fast forward your eyes to see in a spiritual way rather than in a human way. Now, if we look at normal chronology with our human eyes, we see the here, the now. We can only take photos and videos of the past, and we have no idea what's going to happen in the future, except maybe for the weathermen who know that it might rain 2 days from now. But when it comes to icons, what doesn't make sense somehow is how we see the moment in this icon, for instance, when Saint Bishoy is carrying Christ, and yet the moment in the bottom left where he's washing his feet. We get past, we get present, we get a little bit of future if you look at the halos, because the halos in this case are not just representations of what's happening at that moment, i.e. with their spiritual bodies, they are glowing, but it also talks about being deified, being made more like Jesus, because in the last days, although St. John agrees, we don't exactly know what we'll be like in heaven, we know we'll be like him. And to be like him is to be more and more flowing and glowing with the Holy Spirit. So a halo is actually a presentation of the future deification of humanity, the future becoming more like God. So we're seeing past, we're seeing present, we're seeing future, all in a single image. And that's, again, what icons try and do to present this spiritual moment, the spiritual eyes that we could see with, but we don't yet see with. So where are we? Let me just see where we're at with this. I'm 30 minutes in. I don't want to take too much longer. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Okay, I think we've covered what are holy icons, when did they first start, and are they useful to me? I'm actually going to share my screen one more time. I'm sorry I'm going back and forth, but I'm a quick speaker, hopefully. And I'm going to talk very quickly about specifically the Coptic icon, because I think it's very important that everyone has a very brief understanding of where your Coptic tradition came from. Because as I'm sure you all know, within the tradition of Orthodoxy, we have so many different cultures. We have Russian, Greek, Bulgarian, Romanian, Coptic, Ethiopian, and all of them have their different nuances of iconography, and all of them have a slight different histories of iconography. So in the Coptic Church, we'll just go briefly through ours. This man, if you don't know his name, try and remember his name. This is the late Professor Isaac Finus. Not the most handsome man, but he was a lovely man nonetheless. And he liked milk with his coffee. This is him again, making an icon of Zaytun. Anyway, this is Pope Kyrillos. Why do the two have any relevance to each other? Because, interestingly enough, back in the 50s, 60s, Pope Kyrillos got up and said one day, you know what? This Coptic Church really could do with some tighter education. And in one of those ways, we really need to tighten up what and how we teach our iconography. We really do not have an idea of exactly what a Coptic icon should look like. What, you might ask, what on earth does Pope Kyrillos mean? What do you mean we don't know what the Coptic icons look like? We do know what they look like. Funny thing is, back in the 60s, they really didn't. Why? Egypt has this really interesting tradition of ancient churches used to have icons, but whenever the icons became damaged, instead of putting them in a cupboard somewhere for us 50,000 years later to have a look at, they decided to burn them and use the ashes in the censer smoke, in the censer. Help me out, Adrina. In the, well, you know what I'm saying.
Like to burn it with the incense?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, so they would use the ash and burn it in the prayers, and then they would make a new icon from scratch. And then when that got damaged, they'd burn it and use it in the censer. So we have all these gaps throughout history where we don't know what a Coptic icon really looked like during that century. And actually that happened for many, many centuries. We've got, loads of examples from the 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th century. And then suddenly there's an enormous gap somewhere around the 14th century, all the way up until the 17th, tiny, tiny examples. And then it disappears again. And so Pope Nicholas said, right, let's get this straight, guys. What does a Coptic icon look like now? He said, Isaac, you go and find out, come back and teach us. So Isaac went to France. And why France? Well, basically in France, there were some great iconographers happening at the time. And he said, I'm going to go and at least learn what iconography is to the churches that do know what iconography looks like. That's the Russians. He went and learned Russian iconography, funnily enough. Came back, studied in Egypt at the Coptic Museum over and over and over again, and tried to fuse together millennium of images to make a Coptic style worthy of the 20th century Copts. Now, if you have a look at these 4 images, this is a funny set of 4 images. In the very top left, you have a painting that Isaac made before he ever went to France. So this was him just dabbling and saying, yeah, I think this is kind of what I want to represent when I show Mary and Christ. It's pretty crude. And then top right, is it top right? No, actually, beg your pardon. Bottom. No, it is top right. Top right, we get the 1970s, and that's Isaac post his time in France, and him a little bit of time in the Coptic Museum, trying to take from the ancient pharaohs and the ancient Coptic and make a new Coptic style. And you can see from the bottom left, moving to the bottom right, he keeps transitioning and he keeps developing and he keeps trying to find a style that works, that just everyone can say, yeah, I enjoy that. It makes sense. It also has some reference to pharaonic painting, and it has some reference to ancient Coptic, and it carries through all the meanings from those ancient civilizations and those ancient understandings to something that really rings true today. Now, actually, a really interesting thing that Isaac's teacher said is iconography should always be made in the language of its time. And I think that's so important, because it makes your head spin thinking, okay, what is the language of our time? And we're not just talking about, spoken word. We're talking about a visual language. Because when we look at the media today, there's so many different images thrown at us. And what kind of style do they have? Is it an eclectic style? Is it a retro style? Which do we enjoy? What is a universal visual language? This is another set of 4 that shows his progression, again, from the 1950s to the 70s to the 80s to even towards the millennium. And you can just see how he gets sharper and sharper, and then suddenly kind of almost goes a bit soft around the millennium. And he starts kind of fusing in these different ideas of what does a modern day Coptic icon look like? How can it ring true and yet bring together everything that we know about Coptic iconography from ancient generations? Now, these 2 images, I'm sure if anyone shouted out, some of you would know exactly what these are. These are actually examples of Cubism from Austria and Germany. Why on earth am I showing you examples of Cubism from Austria and Germany that have nothing to do with Isaac Fanous, surely, or Coptic iconography, definitely? Well, the thing is, trying to get an image of our time, an artistic tradition of our time, means that Isaac was ultimately a student of art of his day. He was a 1950s, 1960s student of art. And he would definitely know about Cubism. He would definitely know about Impressionism. He'd know about Post-Impressionism. And all these words might be a lot of faff to people who have no care in art in the meeting right now. But if I fast forward to this, these are 2 icons. One of them actually is by Isaac Fanous on the left, and the other one is one of his students, Dr. Stéphane René, who still is alive, thank God, with us. Now, if you have a good look at the mountains, I hope you can probably see, and I'll flick to the next slide, the relevance that Isaac gleaned from Cubism. He was trying to, again, form a style that was representative of, people of his generation, 1950s, 1960s, who were aware of what was going on all around the world, Germany, Austria, even contemporary styles. And he said, you know what, we can use this. This works for our landscape. I think this makes perfect sense within the context of the icon. I'm going to use this. And he took from Cubism and he put it into the landscape in the mountains. Let's have a look at this. This has nothing to do with Cubism. This is Italian Futurism. Now, some would admittedly argue that Italian Futurism really does have nothing to do with Coptic iconography, but I would argue with that. And I would say if we look at this beautiful stained glass window from London, which was also made by Isaac Fanous, or at least it was designed by Isaac Fanous, and you compare it to these really dynamic swooshing shapes that overlap and interlock and interlay and overlay, it's exactly what Isaac Fanous knew about at the time. And he said, right, the visual language of my time has everything to do with the things that are going on all over the world visually. And I'm going to take from here, and I'm going to take from here, and I'm going to use it authentically and make a new Coptic style that is for the people, of the people, for the people. Wow, that sounds like I was referencing something else, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Now, you've had a brief example of what the Coptic icon is nowadays. Obviously, there are many things we can talk about it, and I'll take questions in a few minutes. But let's just really quickly go over the process, since many of you would never have seen it in process. So what you're seeing now are two large boards of wood. Now, they don't look like boards of wood because they're white. That doesn't actually just mean that someone's painted them white. The white that you're seeing on those boards is in fact a mixture of chalk powder and glue. Now, if you go to the British Museum or any museum where you can see pharaonic sarcophagus or sarcophagi, you'll usually see a little label. And on that label, if it's an accurate one, it will say wood with canvas with gesso, i.e. gesso painted onto canvas, which is laid or stuck onto the wood. And that is an ancient tradition that has been going on for thousands of years in Egypt. And this is the exact same tradition we're using today in iconography, which I think is a beautiful tradition, to know that we're using the same thing as the ancients. But apart from the fact that it's beautiful and romantic, it also just means that we have examples of this and know that it lasts many thousands of years if it's kept in the right temperature and conditions and if it's done correctly. So that's why we still use the same process. So the boards you're seeing are gesso, which basically is like a really chalky, absorbent surface, which is painted onto canvas, which is stuck onto the wood. And the good thing about that is also that if a conservator needs to, just in case the icon gets damaged later, he actually has a process to basically lift the canvas off the rotten wood and transfer the canvas and the painting to a different piece of board. Okay, moving on. So once we've actually drawn the icon with charcoal, usually with charcoal, because charcoal is very, very easy to rub out if you're not happy with your lines, we actually paint over those lines with any single color of paint. And that makes sure then the charcoal lines can't be rubbed out anymore. Once we've done that, what you're seeing me in my much younger self do is actually lay glue everywhere that I want to stick gold leaf onto. I mean, all of you probably in primary school have probably laid glue on a piece of paper and then just dabbled loads of sprinkles on it and then turn the page upside down. All you're left with are the sprinkles stuck in the area where you've put the glue. And that's exactly what we do with gold leaf. We put the glue down, we lay some gold leaf down. So it comes usually in squares of about 15 centimeters, which is about 6 inches by 6 inches. We lay it down, overlapping. And then once we brush away all the excess, all you're left with is basically a very clean surface, which looks like a pure sheet of gold, kind of like that. Then what you're seeing me, again, in my younger self, do is basically lay down all the darkest colors that we'll need for the icon first. Now, that's not to say that's the only process, because in fact, there are two main processes an iconographer could and does use. This is called the Proplasmos Technique, which basically means the first layer technique, the Proplasmos. It's a Greek word. Don't we love Greek words? Proplasmos Technique. We lay down all the darkest colors, and it kind of, you'll have to excuse my sister. If she knew that I was showing you this photo, she would kill me. This is my sister and me and our younger selves. This is us putting down all the darkest layers first. So basically what you're seeing is that kind of orangey red on the faces. That's the most shadowy areas of the face once we're finished. Everything apart from that, everything on top of that, each subsequent layer will be lighter and lighter. And let me show you what I mean. These are the two with their Proplasmos layers. So even Jesus, though we know he's going to wear white and red, his white clothing is actually kind of an orangey in this circumstance. And then we start adding lighter and lighter layers, and we build up the kind of slight three-dimensionality of that face with light rather than the opposite way, although some iconographers do use the opposite way and they go from light to dark. Both can be used, but I like the meditation in this process that Christ took us from darkness to light. It's just a meditation, it's not a dogma, but it's a nice meditation, I think. So if I zoom in, you'll see again us adding light in just the right areas so that as time goes on, we're building up this slight three-dimensionality and an understanding of exactly how the face is constructed from light to dark. And you can see that Proplasmos layer that I originally laid down is just the shadowy areas. That's all it's making up. And this again is a picture of me having added light to the other areas on top of the dark blue. I add lighter blue, and that makes up the three-dimensionality of the body. Wow. Okay, I'm really sorry. I know I talk very quickly, and whenever I hear recordings of myself talking, I'm like, dear God, please slow down. But I hope you guys managed to get all that. All right, I am now open to questions for 5 minutes, and then we'll do some drawing. Yeah, okay. Abuna, I'm going to open the floor to you to direct questions, if there are any.
Are there any questions from anyone? If you guys want to raise your hand, if there are any questions. Don't see questions. Oh, there is. I can't hear who's talking. Oh, TNU. All right.
You guys Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you for sharing all those tips with us. My question is, what helps you in like layering the lighter colors over the darker colors?
What helps me? Could you be more specific with when you say what helps me?
So like, what are some good like techniques, like as you've practiced making icons like over time? I know like if I were to try like right now, it would probably like be very blurred. So like, what is something like that you've learned with practice that has helped you like achieve that effect?
Okay. There are a few different techniques. Some people choose to mix their paint very translucently. And so that means when they lay the paint down, it's not really opaque. And so you get a chance to kind of try a few things out. And if it doesn't work, at least it's not very visible. And if you're happy with it, you can just keep adding layers and layers of it so that it forms, again, the color and the shape and the opacity that you want after a few goes. So that's one technique of making the paint that you lay on top of the Proplasmos quite translucent. You can do that by adding some water and some base color. We usually use egg because that's the kind of paint we use, egg tempera. The other option that I use is, I guess, the process of thinking twice, painting once. That's something you'll learn in art school. So instead of kind of delving and jumping right in and saying, right, I just want to get painting because it's fun, like really think about the exact shape that you want to create, exactly how you would do it, where your brush would go from A to Z. And before you start painting, almost like you're playing golf, just kind of look at the ball, take a step back, tee it off. Once you're happy with the kind of swing of your golf club, do the same thing with your brush. Once you're happy with, in principle, what you're about to do with your hand, put your hand down and do that exact thing that you've just practiced on the swing.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope that helps.
Eddie, there's a question in the chat, and then UH has a question. So if you want to see the question in the chat.
On the chat, okay. I'm just going to remind myself how okay, I got chat. Are you painting in oil or acrylic? Sorry, he just answered it. Okay, yeah. So the answer is we usually use paint that allows itself to be layered very quickly. So oil has the unfortunate or sometimes fortunate factor of it drying very, very slowly. So it doesn't allow for many quick successive layers, which lends itself to the way an icon and the style of the icon has developed over the centuries. Acrylic does that. It dries very fast, so you can layer things very quickly. And egg tempera has one better thing than acrylic doesn't, is that it has kind of a rich inherent transparency. Usually acrylic, it was only created in the 1960s, was made with a general opacity. So generally you have to add lots of things to make it more transparent. Egg tempera generally is quite transparent in itself. The next question on the chat is, iconography the only type of art you do? Admittedly, no. I think it's healthy for any iconographer or anyone studying iconography to have practice in other art as well, because they always they always kind of inform the other. So I paint in oils as well. I usually paint pictures of cityscapes or figures, and it's much more squelchy, much more in enjoyment of the material of oil paint. They're usually in oils. They're usually very fast because I kind of enjoy the sense that I can get a finished image in a couple of hours rather than that can take many hours. So yeah, I do enjoy painting. I only do that maybe a couple of months a year. I just kind of carve out 2 months and I just go crazy and do a heap load of oil paintings of cityscapes and figures. Also, is this something only men can do for the church? Who asked that? That's a terrible question. That comes with a loaded question, doesn't it? No, 100% no. You only have to look at the amazing women that go through the Bible, like Deborah or Mary Magdalene, who changed the face of Christianity for all of us, and of Judaism for all of us. No, the iconography is most definitely equally for women and for men. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're lying. How can you practice and learn more about Coptic iconography if someone wants to become an expert, and what are good steps when adding the canvas and gesso onto the wooden board? There are lots of good steps. So let's answer the first part. How can you practice and learn more about Coptic iconography if someone wants to become an expert? The first thing to do is to know that, as with any art, whether that's making a cake or becoming an expert pianist, you definitely cannot do it overnight. But at the same time, you can learn to become a beginner very quickly. So we actually made a course, an online course, if you don't already know about it, on our website, ukcopticicons.com. And it is a pre-recorded video course which takes you through one of the videos I'm about to show you now. And it'll take you through steps of drawing, understanding the basic geometry, drawing the face. And once you've learned the basic geometry, you'll learn how to make hands in the same sort of geometry, and you'll learn a little bit about clothing, and then we'll step up to beginning to paint the face. And so once you've got to that point, I would call you a good beginner if you've managed to take the many hours it would take to get to that point on the course. If after that you feel like God is still calling you to learn more, then it's time for you to take it seriously enough to visit an iconographer in their studio and carve out some days, weeks, months watching and working with them, and then you'll get to a kind of intermediate stage. If after that you feel like God is calling you to become a professional iconographer, then it's about talking to the iconographer and forming the right kind of process and schedule and timeline and chronology that would work for you and him or her, to educate you in the ways that you need. But basically, I would always advise anyone, and I think across the board with the iconographers that I'm close friends with, we would always advise that you start with drawing. So an online course like the one we've created, and I'm not trying to do the hard sell because I'm happy to give it free for anyone who wants to. Sign up today. You don't get a free donut. I would always advise everyone to learn drawing first, because if you delve straight into painting, even if you're a very skilled artist as it stands, it is a different kind of art. It is a different kind of geometry, and it requires a kind of slow process building up of knowledge. Okay, I'll just do one more question before we start drawing. Otherwise, people who want to draw are going to get bored of these questions. What sets Coptic icons apart from other churches' icons? This is an excellent question, a very, very good question. I love this question. The quick answer is heritage. Ultimately, every culture, Greek, Russian, Coptic, Ethiopian, whatever, they want to have a continuous line or a lineage from their ancestors. One, because it's romantic to think that we are, an unbroken line with our generations before. And two, because I'm a firm believer in the colorfulness of culture. I was actually listening to a really beautiful discussion between two very famous iconographers, George Cordis and Ivan Pulveri, who are currently alive and doing wonderful work in Greece and in Italy. And one thing that really stuck out is, God, I hope I don't lose my train of thought here. I'm going to go with it. Here we go. One thing that really stuck out is George Cordis said, I don't want to beat around the bush. The only sacred thing about the icon is God himself. It is not the language. And that really set me off thinking about language, because when we paint, of course, we're using a particular visual language. Icons look a particular way, and that's a visual language. We're using particular ways of painting the face. That is a language. And the same applies, I think many would agree, when it comes to even spoken language. You know, if you look at the liturgy, for instance, we use all kinds of languages in the liturgy, and the language itself is not sacred, God forbid. It is the content, it is God himself in our presence. That is the only sacred thing about it. Yes, we designate that these prayers are for this use, and that makes it sacred also, because it is only for the use of worship. But language in itself is not sacred. So the use of any kind of language in any kind of culture is absolutely permitted. That even gives rise to the examples that you might see in Ethiopian icons, where Christ almost looks black himself. He looks coloured, like an Ethiopian, because in the beauty of the incarnation, he literally was so down to earth, he became just like us. And I once heard a really awesome story, or an awesome metaphor for it, where ultimately the human race were kind of like a bunch of ants, and God was like this enormous, gorgeous giraffe. How on earth does a gorgeous giraffe get to have a face-to-face conversation with an ant? The only option is he either makes the ants giraffes, or he becomes an ant. So that's exactly what Jesus did. He became an ant and suddenly said, "Hey guys, remember me? We used to be friends." And the ants were like, "Whoa, awesome." And then Jesus, the ant, says, "Do you guys want to become giraffes? It's way better up there." And so they all became giraffes. End of story. And that is basically a metaphor for our well, I really did go off track there. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry everyone. I'm definitely not single line minded. Shall we go to a little bit of drawing before everyone?
Yeah, please. I think they're waiting for it.
All right. Sorry for taking so much time.
No, it's good. It's all good. It's all very informative and educational.
Thank you. All right. Right. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to go to this video. Now, admittedly, this video is. Sorry, I've been on my screen. Can you still see the pictures of yourselves, or can you only see my screen?
I can just see a black screen.
Good. All right, great.
Yeah. Can you tell them what they need to? Can you tell them what they need to have ready?
Yes, I will. So if you're going to do this drawing exercise with me, you need to have a piece of paper, kind of letter size or A4, depending on where you're living right now. You need to have a pencil, preferably sharp, or if not, something to sharpen it with, an eraser. And if you're lucky enough to own one of these, you'd have a compass as well, which is something to draw circles with. So if you have all of those things, or at least most of those things, minus the compass, you are ready to begin. This video is one of many on our online course. This is actually, I think, the third in the line of videos. So if you wanted to join the course, this would be one available to you anytime. So I would just give one more disclaimer. If for any reason you have to leave this meeting now, or you really cannot be bothered to draw now because you're completely tired and you want to go home, I understand, no offense taken. You can do this at a later date, but I'm going to work through this with you now, and I'll pause every now and again to give you a chance to draw, and I might narrate over it. But inherently it has narration already, which is my previously pre-recorded voice. Let's start. For this drawing, I've already put in my halo and my head, and it's actually a little bit smaller than the previous Virgin Mary drawing, just so we have a little bit more room to put arms in. So I'll stop there because obviously we have to draw these two circles in. So what you're seeing is a circle pretty much 3/4 of the way up and another larger circle outside of that. If you have a compass, just go ahead and generally draw those sizes proportionate to each other. I'm not going to give you measurements because that's irrelevant kind of now, but with whatever piece of paper you have, try and draw those circles for me roughly where they are on the page. I'll give you just a minute to do that. If you don't have a compass, do not worry. I almost never use a compass when I'm sketching. Just sketch it out, keep drawing circles until they look pretty much like the ones you see on screen. This would be a really good time to have hold music, huh? If I had hold music, it would be John Mayer, just so you all know. Okay, 10 more seconds, and then I'm going to move on. Abuna, are you drawing? I feel like you're not drawing, Abuna.
I'm a very bad artist. I cannot even tell you.
Abuna, this is precisely why we made this course. This course is precisely for people who have either never touched a pencil and deem themselves not artists. That's why this is the formula.
I've had many attempts in the past, and they were so awful.
Well,
so,
you didn't have attempts with my instruction. Okay, we're going to move on. Arms and the hands. So if you do these two circles as before, and I'm going to sketch then quickly a neck, making sure it's symmetrical on both sides, so the same width here as it is here, and just sketch it in quickly, and it can be quite thick for an athletic man. And I'm going to put the shoulders in. Remember, it's halfway between this point and this point, and I can go quite broad. And remember that the shoulders should ideally be no wider than the halo, and that applies for the body as well. We try and make the body generally only as wide as the halo. Right, I'll pause there. Sorry, this video is going kind of quick. So let's put in our neck. Like I mentioned in the video, keep drawing while I'm talking, by the way. Don't stop for my talking. We are gonna do an image. The finished image we're going to try and get to is the one on the left, which is Jesus. So for an athletic man, which we can assume most Jewish men of that time who had to work for a living, they probably had quite a thick neck. So we're going to go with a relatively thick neck like that. Just make sure the two lines that make up your neck are equally distant from the center of the page. If you want, you can actually fold your page in half so that you have that line that gives you an idea of exactly where the middle of the page is. And do your necklines either side. You'll find they're not perfectly vertical, they're just slightly out to the side. And then once you've done that, you can see the shoulders, as I said in the video, start halfway between the circle in the middle and the bottom of the outer circle, not at the bottom of the neck, not at the top of the neck. A lot of people by default start the shoulders when they're drawing for the first time at the bottom of the neck. Don't fall for that. Get the shoulders to start around the middle of the neck. Then try and do two shoulders. Try and make them as symmetrical as you can, especially when we're doing a frontal image of any saint like this. If they're frontal, ideally symmetry is the one thing that's going to tie us in to make it look pleasing to the eye. It's the one thing that you notice. If it's not symmetrical, you'll really notice it, and it'll really kind of be a jarring image for anyone looking at it. Okay, I'm going to give you 20 more seconds to do the neck and the two shoulders. Try and keep the shoulders and the width of the body the same sort of width as the halo that you've given yourself. Good, I can see some people folding their pages in half. Very wise. Okay, 10 more seconds, and then we'll move on. Here we go. Try and make sure your two shoulders are symmetrical, and that by the time you reach the end, this distance and this distance is the same. And we can adjust those later, but hopefully they're roughly symmetrical. Now the next thing we'll do is quickly put in the face, as we did in our very first tutorial. So we're going to put a horizontal line across the middle, and then halfway between here and here is our nose, and halfway between there and the nose, and a little bit up from there is the mouth. Right, I'll pause there because that was a lot in one go for anyone who's never done this before, but if you have done this before, should hopefully feel a bit familiar. So once you've got your central horizontal line through the very center of the circle, or roughly where you can perceive the center of the circle is, between that horizontal line and the bottom of that inner circle, put a little mark where the nose or the bottom of the nose will be. And then halfway between that nose and the chin, you're going to just put a line for the mouth, or slightly above halfway. That's the very simple geometry we're going to give ourselves to make sure we don't go too off track with this face, and that generally Coptic faces have in common with each other. I'll just give you 10 seconds to do that. Simple horizontal line through the middle, another one for the nose, another one for the mouth. Make sure the nose is not too long. It kind of sits right in between the horizontal line through the middle and where the chin is, the very bottom of the circle. 5 seconds. And here we go. And if we split this into 3 parts, 3 equal parts roughly, and our iris goes right there, and it's the same size as if a ball was drawn between those two. Okay, that's a lot of information in one go. So along that horizontal line, you're going to try and split up the width of this circle into 6 parts. So 3 equal thirds either side of that central part of the paper. Okay, so split those up into thirds, and on the first third, draw an iris, a ball, so the same size as if you were going to draw a ball between the nose and the mouth. I'm going to carry on playing. So that's probably a little bit large on this side. This is more like it. I think I found actually this one is much closer to the middle than here, so let's correct that. I think I'll move it this way a little bit. That's more like it. Okay, I'll pause there. Try and get what I've got there. So 2 balls that are symmetrical in size and also the same distance from the center of the face as you can. The more symmetrical everything can be at this point, the better everything will domino onto later. If you get things wrong at this point and they're very asymmetrical, things are going to start looking very alien very quickly, and you're going to start to wonder why Jesus looks like a crazy alien dude. Okay, so keep things symmetrical if you can, guys. 5 seconds, and here we go. Now the distance between this iris and the middle is the same as this iris and the middle. And once we've done that, halfway between here and here, if you make a mark, and here make a mark, and that should be the width of your eyes. We'll do the eyelid. Remember, the eyelid peaks not at the very top of the iris, but about 3/4 of the way up. Your iris should be in the very center of your eyelid, so if you need to correct your iris like me, that's okay. And we'll do the same on the other side, so halfway between here and that point, and here and that point, and make sure this distance is the same as this distance, to make sure the eyes are symmetrical. Okay, I'll pause there. You guys can see what I'm doing there. So we're basically making even more indentations along that horizontal middle to make these marks to know exactly how wide we're going to make the eyes. Now, just as a disclaimer, I've made this video, or rather we've made this video as one way you can make a face in Coptic iconography. Generally, iconographers work a lot faster than this once they're kind of a master of their art, or they're more intermediate and they're more experienced with their drawing. So they might not use this many measurements. But in having spoken to many of my colleagues who are iconographers, we can all agree that this is a good basis for most beginners to work with. And these are kind of the dimensions that we work with. So it's a good starting point. So if you can get those 2 eyelids, you can see they don't quite reach the very top of the iris that you've made. They're just below them, and you'll see why in a second. Make sure they're as symmetrical as possible. Not too curvaceous, just a kind of slight curve. 5 seconds to go, and I'm going to move on. Here we go. And then the eyelid above that. Try and make sure the eyelid is quite symmetrical on both sides. I'll just give you a few seconds to do the eyelid. So it's just, again, another curvaceous line above the line that we've already drawn. It actually peaks a little bit higher and should ideally meet the previous line at its corners. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, just kind of give a sense that there is a thickness to an eyelid. Any questions? Ask my secretary, who doesn't exist. Okay, 5 seconds and we'll move on. Here we go. And once you have that, we can do the nose. So we're going to take this point and bring it downwards. And if we carry these lines down as well, we'll know how wide we can make the nose. We're going to make it just slightly less wide than these lines tell us. But the mouth, the middle of the mouth is going to extend beyond them slightly for the middle line. and then the bottom lip will be as wide as the lines tell us. Right, that's a lot in one go. So I'll pause there. I can see people like, oh my goodness, how am I going to fit this in into 2 minutes? So
Eddie, I think a couple of them are behind. So maybe if you want to just give them a little bit, because some.
I will. Don't worry. Now I'm moving very fast.
Okay.
You guys are doing good. I know that you guys have already done a frontal face before, so that's why I'm not pausing too long, so that you don't get a chance to move on to the next part.
If you guys have questions and need to ask Fadi a question as you're doing your part, feel free to just raise your hand and so on. That is a problem. Lipscomb got lost at the big circle. We'll need to catch up.
That's all right. Like I said, guys, you guys can watch this video anytime you want. It's on our online course. There are about 13 videos like this that move through hands, faces, clothes, painting, full figures, and you can rewatch this anytime you want.
I keep working at it because eventually we want everyone to hold up their icon and show it to the screen to see what you guys came up with. So.
Okay, I'll give you just 30 more seconds and we'll move on. Abuna, you look like you suffer from a bad neck like me.
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, 10 more seconds, guys. I'm going to move on. Anyone who is behind, don't worry. You will definitely get a chance to do this again, either at the end of this or when you watch the video at some other time. Here we go. There's our mouth, nose and eyes. I've made a bit of a smudgy mess here on the paper, so I'll erase that. And now we can do our eyebrows. So let's split this point and this point in half, and half again, about there. And draw a line, and that will give us our guide for our eyebrows, which is the same shape as our eyelid, the first line we drew. Once you've done that, you can extend the edge of them slightly. Hopefully yours will be nicer than mine. And you can also make it a little bit thicker at the top, nearest the middle of the face. Right, I'll pause there, give you a second to do the eyebrows. So like we said, we split the top of the face now up into halves and again in quarters, and the bottom quarter will give us the line in which we can kind of rest the top of our eyebrows. So just make them again as symmetrical as you can, follow the same curved shape as the initial eyelid that we drew, the very first eyelid that we drew. I can't wait to see what everyone is laughing about. I bet it's just hilarious amounts of drawing going on. Okay. Hopefully you guys have got some kind of representation of eyebrows now. We're going to move on. Once you've done that, and they're as symmetrical as they can be, we can start putting in the side of the face. We've already got our marks here, so we're going to take those downwards. And our nose will be the guide for where we put our earlobes. So it'll be there and there. Right, so we'll pause there for a second. So the size of your face. Now this is quite important because too wide and this person is going to look super chubby, and too thin and this person looks like they're going to need a steak dinner. So make sure that you put the sides of the face down at the very first third marker. Okay, we made markers along the horizontal middle of the face, and we made two marks to make 3/3. At the very first third, that's where you take those vertical lines down. And we're just going to do little suggestions of earlobes right now because we're going to have hair enough to cover the rest of the ears. So just give a little suggestion of the earlobes and you can see the bottom of those earlobes are in line with the bottom of the nose. So give yourself some kind of suggestion of where the bottom of the nose would be and draw your earlobes in. Give you 10 more seconds to do those earlobes and the sides of the face. And here we go. And this is where we'll start our hair. So from here, we're going to go down and up, just like that. It's going to go downwards, this curve, and then come up again before it reaches this point here. All right, I'll pause there. You guys can get those two curves in. This is just one way that we do Christ's hair. Admittedly, when you look at the very earliest depictions of Christ, he often, in fact, had curly hair. But it would be naive of me to say that the discovery of the Shroud of Turin did not change the way iconographers started to make their images, especially deal with the hair of Christ, seeing that the Shroud of Turin had pretty much suggestively straight hair. So we all started to kind of go towards straight hair for our depictions of Christ. But that is not to say that you couldn't do a curly head Christ, because realistically, that would probably be the case. I think for a Middle Eastern man in those days, it's very, very feasible that he would have curly hair rather than straight. Anyway, once you've got those two hopefully symmetrical lines, we'll move on. I'll give you 20 more seconds. Saying that, Abuna has pretty straight hair. Okay, here we go. Try and make sure these distances are the same. If they're not, perhaps you need to adjust your line, bring it down or up. Make sure these are as symmetrical as they can be. I'll put in a bit more hair there. And here as well. That's for the hair that wraps around his head. And from here, I'll put another line. Here I'll bring this hair over the earlobe. If you haven't seen the first video on how to do this frontal face, please make sure you watch that video and practice the tutorial many times before you move on to the next tutorial. Right, ignore that last comment and we'll just do it today. So just take a few minutes to put those extra strands of hair in. Again, try and make sure you look left and right and make them as symmetrical as possible. These are just all different ways of getting a few new strands of hair to really build up the hair for Christ if he had straight hair. You can do it in many different ways, but for now, I think just stick with the formula we've got. Keep it nice and simple. I'll give you 1 minute to do all those strands of hair. Do you know, you wouldn't believe how many variations of a Jesus face we get, even with this very formulaic approach. It's going to be absolutely crazy to see how no two are going to be the same. You're going to get some really thin Jesuses and really chubby Jesuses. Yep, can't wait. Okay, 20 seconds and we'll move on. Actually, no, I'll give you a little bit longer because I'm going to admit that the creation of that jawline is probably one of the most difficult things to get right. If you've got it right the first time, I would like to come and shake your hand wherever you are, because I never get it right first time. To get a really nice curve that's symmetrical from left to right and create a really nice jaw that doesn't look too chubby is a difficult organic thing. Take your time and get it right, or at least what you think looks right. Is somebody putting their hand up? I can't answer any questions about this now. You're just going to have to roll with the punches, buddy. Okay, 10 seconds. Here we go. Now, once you've got our whole face in, we can actually add the beard that we were talking about earlier. So we're going to take just halfway between where the top lip ends and the nose is. Curved line like the hair that bows down like that and then flicks up. Try and make sure those are symmetrical, and then from the middle of the nose or from the nostril, the cavity of the nostril, there and there, and you'll see that it starts thick here and gets thinner to almost meet the rest of the moustache down here. I'll pause there for a second so you guys can draw that moustache in. Lots of variations on that. Just note that if that moustache descends too quickly, they're going to look a little bit oriental and look a little bit upset, the faces that you're doing. So try and make sure that that moustache doesn't dip down too quickly, stays kind of flaring out just a little bit longer before it starts to dip down. That'll give the sense that Jesus is just giving you a slight Mona Lisa smile. And if anyone gets the opportunity to go and see the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, I apologize for how anticlimactic it really is. Okay, 10 more seconds. Here we go. And we're going to do a long oval here, beyond the chin. And then we're going to take this line down to meet the bottom of that oval, or sometimes slightly below. Make a V shape here to make sure that we know this is a special beard just for Jesus. Only Jesus would have the V in his beard in icons in the Coptic style. Once you make those two lines symmetrical and you decide whether you want to make your beard slightly longer. I've done quite a short beard really, because he is a young man of about 33 when he died. I'll rub out the lines I don't need and maybe just do a few lines going up and going down and flicking upwards to show some hair. And I'll do some lines even on the chin area like that. Doesn't matter exactly how you do these lines, as long as it looks convincingly like hair. You can experiment with a few different ways and have a look at a few different icons and decide what you like. Okay, I'm going to give you a good 2 minutes to try and do that beard. Not an easy thing to do. Take your time, have a look at the image, figure out how long you want to do this beard. If any of you are familiar with the Shroud of Turin imagery, you'll know that actually the beard suggested in that image is actually a bit longer than this, admittedly, which is feasible for a 33-year-old man. He could have had a longer beard than this. But just to suggest, a relatively young age, I usually have a relatively short beard. And like we said in the video, we usually have this little fork in the bottom of the beard just for Jesus, just one more thing that sets him apart in the personality, the visual personality that he has. Another thing that will set him apart is the cross in his halo, which usually we can only see three rungs of the cross. But no one else will have a cross in their halo other than Jesus, or people who are suggested to basically be a suggestion of Jesus. So for instance, you might sometimes see one of the three angels in who are appearing or visiting Abraham and his wife. Sometimes you'll see a halo in one of their halos to suggest this might have been the Trinity. Might. Okay, 30 more seconds to do that bid, and then we'll move on. I hope you guys are managing this. Anyone who's not drawing and just watching, I would love to know your feedback. So maybe add it to the chat while you're watching. Okay, we're going to move on now. I usually smudge the beard just a little bit to make it look dark like hair, and then moustache as well. And I'll just tidy this line up a little bit because it got smudged. Okay, now we have a simple beard and a frontally facing Jesus. We can start putting in the rest of the hands. Now, I didn't draw the hands in the beginning because I knew with all this space, the hands that I want to draw are definitely going to fit. But let's start putting them in now. So we talked about how and where the elbows would go. So we said it was going to be half of this size of halo. So if I take this distance, down again. From here along is where I'm going to put the elbows. But we can measure that more accurately by taking our compass, putting it at the center and taking it halfway out. So that's half of the diameter, which is the radius. I'm going to put my compass point there, make a mark, and along that line, if I draw a horizontal line, is where my elbows should be for Jesus. The elbows should reach here. So again, if you don't have a compass, you can just measure this quickly and approximately. So we're taking about the radius of that halo and making a mark down the bottom of Jesus' chest. And that is where the elbows are going to sit. Any further down and his forearms are going to look very long, or rather his first top of the arms are going to look very long. So just make a mark, make a horizontal mark, and that's where your elbows will be. Let's move on. I'm going to put my hand of blessing about here. So remember, this oval should be about this size, which is from the bottom of the chin of the original circle to about the eye line, half of the face, because a full hand, if it was stretched out, would be the whole height of the face. So that's where I'm going to put that. This is where the elbow should be. So let's take the elbow to the hand. And the underside of the arm as well. I'll just give you a few seconds to try and get those two shapes in. So when it comes to hands, most iconographers do usually give a very simple shape to give themselves a guide of where they're going to put their hands, roughly how large their hands are going to be, and what kind of shape they occupy. So an oval is a pretty good precursor to a fully drawn hand. So we could draw that oval in and also draw that forearm in. Again, this is just a general shape guide for us. We're going to elaborate on these shapes in a minute, and you'll see how we actually build up various types of hands. In this case, two types of hands, a blessing hand and a hand that might be holding an object like a Bible. Just 20 more seconds. Actually, I can see that most people are done, so we're going to move on. I'm going to rub this line up because I don't need it right now. And I'm going to make this shoulder just a little bit less broad. I think it's too muscular for a 30-year-old Jesus. There we are. And once I've got this arm in, I think I can make this forearm just a little bit larger. There we go. When I say this is where the elbows will be, that's just an approximate guide for us. We can be slightly bigger or slightly smaller if we want it to be. It's quite what we call an organic way of drawing, where you make decisions as you go along based on how your drawing is going. You can be a little bit here, a little bit there, and keep roughly to the guidelines. The guides are there to help you, not restrict you. So once we have that there, I'm going to just start drawing that hand. So we split it down the middle, this middle, and in quarters. And I'm going to put my thumb 3/4 of the way up. Okay, I'll just pause there so you guys can get an idea of that simple geometry that we put inside that oval. You can see we split it down the middle vertically, and then we split it up into quarters. So a line horizontally across the middle, and then two more to make the quarters. Once you've done those simple lines that just make up the simple geometry of the hand, I'm going to start putting in the thumb first, as you can see in the video. And it just starts the tip of the thumb at the very top quarter, the line of the very top quarter. And you can see it's a gentle curve, starting outwards, moving in, punching out, and then meeting the forearm. Have a really good look at that two-part curve. Try and replicate it if you can. Okay, I'll move on in 10 seconds. Here we go. There's my thumb. My index finger, I'm going to... Okay, I'll just leave it there for a second so you guys can do the full thumb and also start to do the index finger. If you're not sure exactly what we're looking at, again, take a look at the drawing on the far left of the screen. You'll see the finished image, so you get a sense of what we're about to draw. Now, just in case you guys aren't familiar with the hand that we're using now, you've seen it probably in liturgical use when Abuna blesses the Orban, or when he's choosing the lamb at the very beginning of the liturgy. But this is one of a few different Roman gestures that suggested the person was either teaching or speaking. So we usually call this the hand of the orator, the person speaking or the person to be listened to. Almost like when someone would stand up and say, hear ye, listen to what I'm about to say. Or, men, can I have your ears for a second? Lend me your ears. This is the kind of gesture that would suggest that in the Roman Empire. But it also kind of morphed later on to be the hand of blessing. So let's carry on with this index finger. There. I think that's a good length. Here's my middle finger. If you haven't watched the video on hands, please make sure you do. Ignore that comment. Just do those 3 lines that I've just done. Try and find where they match up to with the simple geometry we started to make in the oval. So there are 3 lines, and they'll be, they'll meet the horizontal lines that we've drawn previously, or they'll be in between the horizontal lines. Take your time and just try and understand where those lines, those diagonal lines that I've just drawn, where they meet the horizontal lines we started with in the hand geometry. If you're thinking, oh my Lord, my drawing looks nothing like this, or hey, my drawing looks better than this, congratulations. But if you're the first kind of person and my drawing looks nothing like this, don't worry if this is your first attempt. This drawing you're seeing me do right now is my billionth attempt, and it still goes wrong, and I'm still erasing things and trying again. So there's no shame in knowing that you can't get it right first time. Okay, 10 seconds and we'll move on. 3, 2, 1. Because I describe and show you how to actually draw hands like this. Of course, it's very important to practice that before you try this video. Now, if you look at my hand, I would say probably that hand is a little bit small for that head. I would want to actually make that a little bit larger. So I'm not afraid to rub out that hand and start again. I hope you won't be afraid either if you look at your hand. I can see people laughing. Don't laugh. Look, this happens to the best of us. Sometimes we draw a hand and we realize, my goodness, that hand is terrible. Let's do it again. Don't make your hand any, don't be ashamed to rub out your hand if you find that it's just too small. All right, I did it. Fine. Oh, that hand looks a little bit small. I'm going to remake mine. Let's make it a little bit larger. There's no shame in getting it wrong and doing it again. No shame at all. So hopefully that hand will be a little bit better. Let's see if I start drawing in the hand, will it be big enough? I think it's a bit better. Okay, I'll pause there. So anyone who's tried this hand again tries to get a good look at the geometry. Where do those diagonal lines match up to the quarter lines that we've made to make the simple geometry of this hand? You can see they either meet the lines at the tip of the lines or in between the lines, never arbitrarily anywhere else. Okay, I'm going to move on. Is it good enough? We're going to find out once I've finished. Yes, I think that's better. But now I find that my forearm probably needs to be a bit flatter at the top. So let's change that line, be a bit flatter. I think that's more like it. I'm going to take away a bit of this line, so it looks like it joins with the arm and they're not two different objects, the arm and the hand. Right, that's better. I think that's more like it. So again, don't be afraid to try something, think it's the right size, and then realise it's not the right size. I'm going to do it slightly different. I'm going to rub it out and I'm going to start again. No problem. There's no problem with that. So now let's do another hand that's maybe holding a gospel book. Before we go to that hand, I'm just going to give you a few seconds to try and get this hand exactly as you'd like it to be. Take a good look at your hands, perfect it as best you can. Okay, 10 more seconds. Out of curiosity, of all the people that are drawing now, could you just give me a show of hands? Who's actually done the first tutorial with just the frontal face? No? Wow. Okay.
No, some did, because we did the just the face last year. So some of them who were in school at that time, they would have done it.
Okay, so maybe about
some of the, yeah, if they did not attend, they wouldn't have done it, and so on. So yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you for the people who raised their hand. For the people who didn't raise their hands, I'm sincerely sorry that you're seeing this for the first time. Okay, let's move on. So we're going to do another oval here. Once you've drawn that. Oh, sorry, I just realized that that video goes very quickly to the next bit. So, all right, let's just rewind for a second. Bear with me. Actually, can we rewind? I'm not going to rewind. You can see where the oval is. Just give yourself that oval and you can see the general shape of this hand that I've given myself. It's without fingers, but again, it starts with a thumb, wraps around, and we get a general shape of the hand. You'll have to forgive me because this is a video that comes after the tutorial specifically on hands. But try and emulate the shape that I've got there for the other hand. I'll just see if I can play a little bit and we can see more of the hand. You can just put quick. There we go. Now you can see all of the hand. Try and just emulate that shape that we've got there. I've actually got another iconographer, George McCary, staying with us right now in England. I think his brother's watching, Theo. If he's watching, Theo, thank you for participating. And we actually went to Paris this last weekend, and it was the most hilarious thing to try and watch the Parisians understand George's Canadian accent. We would all be at a lunch table, and he'd be like, can I get some water, please? And they'd be like, pardon? And they'd say, water. George, it's water. At very least, it's water. Queen's English. Yeah. Anyway, let's carry on. Guide of our gospel book in his hand. It's nice sometimes to make the gospel book leaning like this. It just gives it a bit more of an interesting thing to look at in that icon than if it's perfect. Okay, I'll just pause there so you can get that gospel book also in the hand. Just take a minute or so to try and get that hand. Make sure it seems a similar sort of size proportion to the other hand, the blessing hands, and get yourself a gospel book. You don't have to have it leaning, but I always prefer to have a nice gap between all the objects in the icon. So that's why I've pushed the icon leaning away from the other hand, because if it was perfectly straight, it would actually overlap the blessing hand, which seems a bit awkward to me. In fact, we usually call that visual tension, when something just doesn't seem like it has enough space to breathe. I'll give you 30 seconds to try and get that hand and the gospel book in there. Okay, 10 seconds. And here we go. Straight. So this is our elbow. Now this forearm looks much shorter than this. That's okay, because what we're going to understand is that when Christ is looking at us, sometimes the arm actually comes away from the body, and although this when we look at it now and the icon looks short, really in real life it would make sense. So make sure you've got a wrist thick enough like this one. So you start maybe here and here and draw forearm. That would stop there and go to about there. Maybe you can go outwards a little bit like we did on the other side. Now, the reason that looks a bit silly is because actually we haven't put our sleeves on top of that. So let's start putting our sleeves. I'm going to just do a very long sleeve on Christ. I'm going to take a vertical line all the way off the icon, all the way off the edge of the icon. 2 lines to show the inside of the sleeve. And we're going to go from his forearm, and the sleeve would fold downwards. Right, I'll pause there so you can get not just the forearm, but a little bit of that sleeve in as well. Again, this is just one of many ways that A, you could draw a forearm, B, you could draw a sleeve. Different iconographers, even within the Coptic tradition, use various different methods, and we all have our various different nuances. So although I'm teaching this particular method in this particular shape or set of shapes, don't think this is the only way that Coptic iconographers all draw their faces, hands, and sleeves. That's not the case. Okay, I'll give you just 20 more seconds to get that while I read some of these comments. I just read, how do we do this without a compass, lol? Yeah, the answer to that is try, and try again. Or yeah, use mugs and bowls. Sorry, Bruna, I just saw your message now. Do you mean in 20 minutes time? Okay, got it, yeah. Oh yeah, I think we could definitely do that. Like I was planning to be asleep in 20 minutes time. Okay, right, let's carry on. Here we go. Gravity, and we can rub away this line, just erase that line away. We don't need that because the sleeve would be covering that line. And what we see now is a sleeve falling downwards. And we can do the same on this side. Vertical line and another vertical line, and generally make these widths the same on both sides. And we can rub away this part of the forearm and continue the sleeve downwards, and make sure this is the same as this to make really sure the icon is symmetrical. Okay, I'll just give you 20 seconds or so to try and get those sleeves there and to erase the lines that you don't need. While you guys are doing that, I'll just say a couple more tidbits of information. It's always interesting to note that when you look at the different cultures of iconography, one thing that sticks out about Coptic iconography is generally the proportions of the face compared to the body. It seems like the head is always a little bit bigger than it should be when compared with the body. If you look at Da Vinci's drawings of the real proportions of a body, you'll find that the head is kind of like about seven, or it could be broken up as a seventh of the body. Whereas in an icon, in a Coptic tradition, it's more like a fifth. The reason is basically we're trying to, as I said, trying to fast forward your spiritual eyes to not just see what may be invisible to the human eye and realistic in the spiritual realm, but actually kind of fast forward your spiritual thoughts to the most important thing in the icon. In this case, the most important thing is kind of the psyche, the actual person's feelings. The person themselves almost resides in their face, doesn't it? I mean, when you look at someone, yes, you read their thoughts and their feelings through their body language, but predominantly it's through their face and what's going on in their face. So that's why we generally fast forward your thinking to their face by increasing the size of the head and getting you kind of picking that up first thing. It's like when you look at the cover of a magazine, when an artist uses an eye that's looking straight at you, the viewer, they kind of fast forward your focus to this one thing, and that's the kind of thing we do in an icon. In fact, one thing you'll notice between pharaonic painting, ancient Egyptian painting, and Coptic painting, one very famous factor or similarity is that you'll find that Jesus is always huge in comparison to everyone else in the icon, even if that everyone else is standing right next to him. The same thing happens in ancient Egyptian painting. Pharaoh is almost always enormous compared to everyone else. And the idea is to pull your focus to the most important thing or the most important person in the icon, regardless of what realistic proportions are. Okay, let's carry on now that we've done the sleeves. And balanced and looks comfortable to the person looking at the icon, comfortable to the viewer. You should see now that we've rubbed away these lines, it kind of looks a little bit more realistic now. We sort of understand that even though this seems like a shorter forearm, really it's just because the arm is coming away from the body and holding something thick like a Bible. So we're going to just make sure both shoulders are symmetrical, and we're going to bring this line of the shoulder, this line of the arm, to meet the elbow more than it did previously, so that looks correct. And let's go over the neck again, and we can finish the neck at the bottom of the halo. That's generally where we finish the neck, where the halo finishes, and even carries on around there. So finally what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit more clothing on his shoulders. So usually we have the undergarment, which is white for Christ, which generally signifies or portrays that he's pure like a sheep, like a cloud, pure, divine and white, clean. Or if you think about white light actually is a colour that contains all the spectrum of the colours. So it's almost like he's both clean, perfect and completely full and complete. So, so over the top of that white garment is his red garment, which in Coptic iconography would symbolize his red blood sacrifice. Red like blood, so his blood sacrifice on the cross. So we're going to draw a line down here, because there'll be a piece of clothing coming down his chest like this. It wraps around his neck, comes down on the other side, but instead of just carrying on the line down here behind this arm, we're going to actually pretend that it curves like this, and it's just covering a little bit of the shoulder here, just to give a bit of interest, because if we're symmetrical all the time, it can become a bit dull. So since this is falling downwards, we're going to draw some zigzag lines going generally downwards to show that the cloth is falling in a downwards position. So zigzag, but those lines are generally falling vertically. And in this one, since the cloth is being pulled at this sort of angle, really being stretched that way over his shoulder, we're going to do the lines that way in a zigzag way. Okay, let's pause there and just try and get that bit of clothing in. Very simple. Christ is always wearing, well, not always, but in most icons he's wearing white and red. In Coptic iconography, it's different in Byzantine iconography, that of the Russians and the Greeks, and there's a lot to be said about that. But for the sake of knowing your Coptic iconography, white is always for purity or divinity, and red is for the blood sacrifice. So if you could just draw in those simple lines to designate the undergarment, the tunic, and then the overgarment. Triangles or zigzag lines are a method we pretty frequently use in Coptic iconography. That was, to be honest, really developed by Isaac Fanous, not really predating him. Okay, we've got about 7 minutes to finish this, so I might just let it carry on for another 2 or 3, and then we'll just take any further questions. And if anyone wants to work more on this drawing, like I said, it's available on the online course. If you go to ukcopticicons.com or just Google Coptic Icon course, you'll find it there. I'm going to carry on in 10 seconds. Here we go. And really that's probably all we want to do in terms of the actual design. Now sometimes if it's wrapping around his shoulder and going down this shoulder, instead of just going behind this arm, perhaps it comes down and starts to fold over his chest. So we might pretend that we can see this bit of red clothing going this way as well, and we'll do a few zigzag lines going like that as well. Finally, let's just finish off the hair. So we take the outside of the hair and we let it fall onto the shoulders, as in our very first tutorial video. And when it falls onto the shoulders, it bunches once, twice, maybe 3 times, and into the shoulders as well. I'll do twice on this side, again, so that we're not completely symmetrical all the time. And we'll put in some more strands of hair to really show that this is hair and not just a bunch of shapes. And with the top of the hair, we're going to go round to follow this line parallel. It's difficult sometimes on the other side, but try as best as you can to be symmetrical. Once you've done a few strands of hair to show the direction that the hair is flowing, just like the clothes, then we can maybe smudge the outside a little bit, just to make the hair look a little bit dark and not like blonde hair, because Jesus was Middle Eastern, so probably had dark hair. Okay, I think we can probably stop there for the drawing. I know some of you will be frustrated because you didn't quite finish at least all the parts of the drawing, including putting the fingers in for the hand that's holding the gospel book, but maybe we'll leave that for a different occasion, or if you go to the online course, you can try and get a fuller context of what we do with hands and why. Okay, maybe we can give like 2 minutes just for any additional questions, if there are any, and if not, I'm going to give it straight back to Abuna. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now.
Can we see what everyone was able to produce with this lovely tutorial? If you guys want to hold it to the screen. Oh, look at that.
That is good. Wow, there's already so much variation. It's awesome.
Good job, everyone. Wow.
Very good. Thank you, guys. That's fun. That's great.
Some future iconographers, maybe.
That's awesome.
His is the best. That's actually
Oh,
He's the only one that brought a camp compass.
Oh no.
Very nice.
UDT, I love your one.
No, ours is the best.
That's awesome.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Fadi, so much. Cannot thank you enough for your time, especially how late it is at this time. And we're very happy to have you with us tonight and enrich us with your learnings from iconography and show everyone here how to write an icon. What a great blessing. Oh, it seems like someone from UH is showing you an icon of the Theotokos.
Oh, good job.
Look at that. Someone is getting ahead. All right. Does anyone have any questions for Fadi before we end this? Okay. Fadi, once again, thank you so much. May God bless you for what you do. And thanks for your precious time, quite honestly, and for all this effort. May God bless you and bless what you do. And may it be a blessing to many, many people in teaching about iconography and how we can connect in our worship.
Thanks, Bruno. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. We're so happy to see all of you guys and all the chapters here lumped and gathered together. Hopefully, everyone was able to follow along and do some good work. And whatever you guys have, you can take pictures of the icons and send them to your regional synod leader. So that will be nice that we can have what everyone did. All right. Thank you, everyone. Good night, everyone. Good night, Fadi. Thank you again so much.
Good night, Bruno. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Good night, everyone. Bye.